it has led to this huge chain of events. In order to try to salvage the event, they stripped Conor, they promoted Jose to featherweight champion. They've got another interim belt on the line between Holloway and Pettis. We've got like the inception of belts going on. Given the huge 200 and 205 events that we had so close to each other, would you have done anything differently to protect the events around them from becoming so fragile? And do you think it's a smart move long term for the UFC to remove that double champion moniker from Conor McGregor?
Ooh, this is a juicy one as well. Okay, so first I will say that, look, UFC 205 was great. UFC 200 was great on paper before all the issues. But we have to remember that in this day and age, when you're going to put together a stacked card, the next pay-per-view, more often than not, is going to suffer because there's so many fight nights in between. It's not like 2007, 2006. You could put together a stacked card, and then the next pay-per-view can be stacked 2 months later. And so we saw that with 201. We saw that with 206. They were given the George St. Pierre wild card that fell out of the sky, where George was basically begging, like, give me the opportunity, give me the contract, let's figure things out. I want to fight in Toronto. Really, he didn't care against who. He just wanted to come back. He wanted to fight. Now, I'm not naive. I mean, he wants to make money. He wants to get a good deal. And they had to negotiate, and they couldn't come to terms with him. And I thought that this was a very risky thing because GSP coming back to Canada is a big deal. It's a big deal if he's fighting me. It's a big deal if he's fighting you. It's a big deal if he's fighting the 30th guy in the welterweight division. It's a very big deal if he's fighting for the middleweight title against Michael Bisping. It's a very big deal if he's fighting Nick Diaz. You get the point. And they didn't do this. So I was saying that this card is one headliner injury away from really crumbling in front of our eyes. And we've seen this over the past couple of years. Lo and behold, Daniel Cormier gets injured. And so they try to do this interim light heavyweight title fight between Rumble and Mousasi, and Rumble says thanks but no thanks, and I don't even know if that was the answer necessarily. I mean, it's a fine fight, it's a great fight. I don't necessarily agree with the idea of making an interim light heavyweight belt because let's not forget Daniel Cormier was ready and willing to defend his title in July. It was John Jones who disqualified himself, but Rumble says no. So then they say, okay, we need a big main event. We're going to elevate Max Holloway and Anthony Pettis. We're going to make it for the interim featherweight title. And to me, there's just so much. Oh my, there's just so much to peel away here because, okay, first of all, you had a featherweight champion. His name was Conor McGregor. You had an interim featherweight champion and Jose Aldo fighting Frankie Edgar for the interim belt 6 months after Conor won the belt to me made no sense. But fine, you had the interim featherweight champion in Jose Aldo. And so you strip Conor McGregor of the featherweight title, your biggest star, your top draw, the guy who continues to say, I want to talk to you guys, I want my equal share, I want to meet face-to-face, and they have yet to do that. And they take that belt away from him 2 weeks after he made history, and then they give the official belt to the guy who he knocked out just 11 months ago, and then they make, Pettis and Holloway for the interim title. So to me, if you were going to make Pettis Holloway for a belt, it had to be for the real belt. If you were going to go to the extreme length of stripping Conor and almost disrespecting him, you had to make this fight coming up for the real belt. And then you tell Jose Aldo, who, by the way, has been talking about retirement and throwing fights and all kinds of stuff, you're going to get the first crack at this real belt. And I thought that was an important thing that they needed to do. The other thing is, you have to ask yourself, why did they do this? Why did they strip Conor McGregor on Saturday? Why did they say that he relinquished the belt? Because Daniel Cormier got injured. And that, to me, makes no sense. If Daniel Cormier doesn't get injured, Conor McGregor is still the featherweight champion. So it doesn't make any sense to strip the featherweight champion because the light heavyweight champion got injured. And if that's the reason why you did it, which it is, that just proves that the act was flawed. And then the big mistake of them all, in my opinion, is the way in which they did it. So the last time a champion relinquished his title, not related to a positive drug test or getting in trouble with the law, was George St. Pierre at UFC 167. He said, I'm walking away, I'm giving up the belt. How did they address that situation? They had a conference call with Dana White and George St. Pierre. They met with the media. They answered questions. This time, they have their announcers go on television and read off a piece of paper, this is what's happened, and Conor McGregor is no longer the champion. And it wasn't giving him the respect that he deserved. In order for the audience, the fan base, especially his loyal fan base, to get behind this, he had to do it himself. He had to do it on his own terms. He had to make the announcement. He had to have a press conference. He had to say, okay, I'm giving it up because I won't be able to defend it. I won't cut down to 145. And they just took it away from him. And I think that now all they've done is empowered him, made him a sympathetic figure, made him someone that the fans are going to rally behind even more. They've created a bigger rift between him and them. Again, like I said on Monday, I thought that the whole thing was botched. And I will say, and I want to repeat this, and I want to make it very clear, I think that they were well within their rights to strip him if he had no intentions of defending the belt within 12 months. I made up this 12-month rule, and I think it's one that they should abide by. If you're not going to defend your belt within 12 months or have a fight booked within 12 months, they should be able to strip you. And it's clear that that wasn't going to happen. So I actually agree with the decision to take the belt away from him. I don't agree with why they did it and how they did it.
Yeah, I think Ariel hit the nail on the head there. I also think, though, that by taking the title away from him, especially in just such an unceremonial manner, they've kind of shot themselves in the foot when it comes to their, how 2017 is going to perform for them. Because, like it or not, even if this belt somehow, gets an extra 100,000 buys for UFC 206, which historically it hasn't, before Conor McGregor came in the scene, historically it wouldn't make any real difference at all. But even if it does, you have to ask yourself how that compares to how much more money Conor McGregor would have made them by drawing in casual fans with this, two-weight champion, historically legendary achievement, type thing going on. It's going to be harder for them to push that angle now. Not for the hardcores. We all know it won't change anything for us. But in terms of drawing in casual fans, a two-weight champion carries more weight than this guy's the lightweight champion. And I have to think it might hurt them in that regard. In terms of if they could have done anything differently, I mean, Ariel brought up on Monday the GSP negotiations. If they'd handled that better, they would have had no problem rescuing 206. 206, George St. Pierre against anyone, boom, that's the show, it's rescued. But it seems like they didn't do that, and it seems like fighters are a lot more reticent to jump in and save the day now than they perhaps would have been even a year ago. And I don't know if that's due to the sale and the new management. I don't know if that's due to fighters realizing that the company's not going to look after them if they just do them favors. I don't know what the impetus behind it is, but it definitely seems like fighters are a lot less likely to risk their own career and their own place and their own title shots for the good of the company. And maybe a year ago, guys would have been happy to take replacements and stuff, where instead we saw them turn them down this time.
I know Gegard Mousasi wanted to fight Anthony Johnson. Supposedly they wanted to do an interim belt, and I have no issue with Anthony Johnson saying, you know what, I'm fine. If DC is going to be out till February or March, I will gladly wait and have the fight rebooked for then. There is the risk of, okay, what happens if I lose to Mousasi? I'm losing to a guy who's been a middleweight these last few fights. He's a very good light heavyweight, but he hasn't fought there in a while. If I lose to him, I lose my title shot. So that's something you don't want to mess around with, especially given the historical uncertainty with promised title shots just across the board. UFC 206 is really it's so wild because it arguably got boosted by a couple fights falling through at UFC 205. He had Cerrone versus Gastelum fall apart, so Cerrone goes to 206. He had Evans versus Kennedy called off at 205, so they moved that to 206. And all of a sudden, you got a pretty good pay-per-view card right there with Cerrone fighting Brown and Evans fighting Kennedy. So you still got Cerrone versus Brown. Evans versus Kennedy is not happening. They're going to try and do Gastelum versus Kennedy. But Holloway versus Pettis as a main event, even with an interim belt, that doesn't sound like something that's going to really sell. And the featherweight division has really suffered from not only the lack of, just historically, Jose Aldo has had his own injury problems. He's never been a popular draw. Conor McGregor made people care about the featherweight division. Make no mistake about it. And this is now the third time in the last year they've created an interim belt. They created one for McGregor against Mendes. They created one for the Aldo Wegner rematch, and now they're doing one for Holloway versus Pettis. And at that point, the belt almost becomes meaningless because of how mishmash it's been. handling the division. I think Ariel is right. The UFC did not handle this in the best way imaginable. They did not handle this well at all. And it also hurts Jose Aldo because absolutely nobody is going to believe he is the, quote, undisputed featherweight champion when the guy he just beat is Frankie Edgar, who, last I checked, wasn't the featherweight champion. The lasting memory people have of Jose Aldo is him getting knocked out by Conor McGregor,